Welcome to the Metal Bob Live Podcast. I am your host, Metal Bob. Today's show is brought to you by Legend Picks and also artist Jeremiah Kalleck. You can find links to our sponsors and more on the Metal Bob Live website. There you can also find links to the latest Metal Bob gear, including shirts, hoodies, and more. On today's show, I had the honor of speaking with artist Croce. We discuss his most recent album, Just Like Medicine. We talk about the recording process of 12 Tales, and also touch on when we can expect his latest covers album featuring songs by some of his favorite artists. So sit back, have a listen, and enjoy the show. Thank you.
This is AJ.
Hello, AJ. This is Bob from the Metal Bob Podcast. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Bob. How are you?
Well, first, I'm doing great, man. First off, thank you so much for taking your time out of your day. It's very appreciated here.
Oh, no problem. Where you at, Bob?
I am in Missouri.
All right. What town?
Columbia.
Oh, okay. Right in the heart.
Yes, sir. So my first question for you today is, so you have been a full-time musician since the young age of 15, and shortly after you find yourself opening shows for the likes of B.B. King, Ray Charles. You know, that must have been a lot of pressure. How did you handle the sudden success, and how was the experience?
The experience was amazing. I was too young to really, of course I was, you'd be nervous in that situation, especially, opening for B.B. King was the first, that was the first gig before, touring with a lot of other folks. But, so, I was playing solo on those shows, opening and then sitting in with him on certain nights and touring with him in the bus and so forth. But, with Ray Charles, it was interesting because one of the guys in my band had been with him for about 10 years, and had been part of the horn section with Ray Charles. So it was a really amazing thing because he had been such a huge influence on me, and I've always loved his music, still listen to it all the time.
Right. So, who were some of your influences growing up, and what did you take away from them musically that helped your career?
All kinds of folks. Ray Charles is a great example because he played in, so many different genres and was so good at making everything his own. And I think that was the thing I loved. Also, he was able to record in a fashion that was really timeless. And so many of the recordings, there are certain things with this, choirs in the background where it's a bit dated in that fashion, but so much of it could have been recorded any time in history, from the, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It could have been done any time that people were playing that music. And so I was inspired by it. But I listened to all kinds of stuff from like Fats Waller and James B. Johnson. Of course, Little Richard was a huge influence. The New Orleans music, like, Alan Toussaint was a big influence. And Mose Allison. As far as, there were things that were coming out at this, in the 60s in England, like the Stones and the Kinks and the Beatles and the Faces, that, I love that stuff. I love the way that he and McLaughlin played with the Stones and with the Faces, and he really took that sort of Little Richard thing and did something new with it. And so, there was a lot of stuff, and then a lot of stuff from, growing up, listening to a lot of songwriters like Randy Newman, Tom Waits, and Elvis Costello, and Squeeze, and, groups like that. But I listen to everything. I listen to all kinds of music.
And your biggest influence is probably soul music. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Soul music, growing up listening to Otis Redding and Sam Cooke and Aretha and James Brown and, all the Stax stuff, all the Muscle Shoals stuff and Motown and the Philadelphia stuff, of course, But, to me, as long as the music has soul in it, it could be gospel, it could be country, it could be anything, rock and roll, and it doesn't matter. It's just about it having heart, being real, being honest.
Absolutely. So how long have you been down in Nashville now?
I've been here on and off pretty much since '08, and I've moved here and left, and I moved back again in '15. Lived in California for most of my life in San Diego, and I was born outside of Philadelphia in Bryn Mawr, which was, I think, just convenient because it was close to a gig that my dad played fairly regularly on the weekends.
Okay. So my next question is, I know in 2013 you signed with Compass Records to release 12 Tales. Now this was an interesting recording process because you recorded songs in multiple cities with 6 different producers.
Oh man, it was hard.
Yeah,
It was
I bet.
so hard. I had this concept, and then it really, I couldn't have done it without my manager's help. Jeff and I were calling different people all over the place, trying to. I had a huge list of different producers I wanted to work with, and I had this idea that I would record one song with a different producer, but it wasn't very plausible, and it wouldn't hold together properly, song to song. So what I thought was a better idea is if I could go and record basically a 45 with producers that I liked and also liked what I did. So the first person that I worked with was Cowboy Jack Clement, and he was the first person that signed on, and that really helped because not only had we known each other since I was 17, I did my very first recording session just playing piano for Cowboy here in Nashville. That was my first foray into recording ever, was with Cowboy. And then because and then I went and I played for Alan Toussaint, and he dug it, and we started working. And after that, it was just really interesting. Different producers that had. Mitchell Froom was really great to work with. That was really fun just because of the way we did it. Greg Lease and I had worked together on a couple things over the years, but he had been the first producer on my first album before John Simon and T-Bone Burnett came in. And I just have loved the stuff that he's done with Tom Waits. He produced about 6 or 7 Tom Waits records with him and played bass with him, and also produced some great John Zorn records and Ornette Coleman stuff. So he was just a really interesting composer, arranger, producer, just really talented guy. Everyone, was really talented. The thing that was interesting is we pretty much did these recordings. Kevin Killen, another person who, everyone was unique. Some were musicians, some had come up as arrangers, some were engineers like Kevin. Some did both, and it was sort of interesting. That was just a new kind of project and completely different. As you saw, like the next thing I did was, I recorded live with Dan Penn, with the next record, with Just Like Medicine, and it just simplified everything, and it was kind of perfect because we had this mix of Muscle Shoals players like David Hood and Muscle Shoals horns and Cropper and just Colin Linden, just some amazing players. And so that was quite different, because I recorded that mono specifically because we all listen to stuff on our phones now. And I thought mono sounded so much better on my iPhone than the sort of crappy stereo MP3s I was hearing. I just thought it would be a good way to go, since it's sort of like a transistor radio I used to have.
Right. And that actually brings me to my next question. I was going to ask you about Just Like Medicine. So that's your most recent effort, and what a great record it is, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
This was actually my first experience with your music.
Wow.
And
Thank you.
Shortly after I was able to catch you on the road, I caught you at a theater in Galesburg, Illinois, I think about 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, your musicianship and energy on the piano just absolutely blew me away.
Well, thank you.
What was the inspiration behind Just Like Medicine, and whose idea was it to record your father Jim's song "Name of the Game"?
That was my idea about Name of the Game. The way the record came about was that I had seen Dan Penn perform at a club here in town, and he was just playing solo, and he played all his hits. I'm Your Puppet, Dark End of the Street, Do Right Woman, just like on and on, all of these great songs, classics, right? And The Letter by the Box Tops, and I went up to him afterwards, and he's a songwriter and down to earth dude, in overalls. And I said, Dan, I'd love to write with you. And he said, all right, well, give me your number. And I gave him my number, and a couple weeks later, I got a call. We wrote The Other Side of Love in about an hour. And then, like certain songwriters, and he's probably one of the finest songwriters I've ever had a chance to work with, and I've been lucky to work with some great ones. But he's such a natural, and his ideas of rhymes are just so good and honest and interesting. And he just we just hit it off. We recorded that and Cure's Just Like Medicine. Instead of doing a demo, we recorded it as if it was going to be a single, because and my label Seedling, sort of started it. Same thing with 12 Tales. I started it on my label, not knowing who was going to pick it up, and Compass came in with Just Like Medicine. I knew that Compass was involved, but I was pretty clear about wanting to just sort of get the ball rolling and going and strike while the iron was hot. So that's what we did. And so when we recorded those two songs, it was we did it in one day, and we had as many people as could fit in Dan's basement studio here in Nashville, and then all recorded a tape, all live, and then really treated it like it was one of the Box Top records that he recorded, which was the band playing live, one thing for vocals, although we didn't do that, just did a separate track for backgrounds, because I sing everything live when I'm playing on the records. And then one for horns.
Okay.
And that was Muscle Shoal horns. And it just was so much fun. I said, do you want to make a record? And he said, sure. And that was it.
Nice. Yeah, so I mean, that's been about 3 years now. Is there anything we can expect coming out in the near future?
Oh yeah. I recorded in December and January, and was planning on having an album out called By Request, which is really fun. It's all these songs that I've played for years, covers. I've never done a cover album, and I thought it would be fun to do an album of songs that my friends request. And so it's really diverse, everything from Billy Preston and to Tom Waits to Randy Newman to Five Stair Steps to Alan Toussaint. I do an obscure Motown instrumental. I mean, it's really fun, and I use my touring band as the core group, but Robin Ford came in, some great horn players, great singers. It was just fun. It was really fun. And again, we did it live, like I like to, because it's just honest, it's real, and I hope that it sort of carries the same energy that it would if you were listening, at a concert or at my house.
Right. So is there a release date for that at all, or?
Well, it was supposed to come out this month,
Okay.
But with everything going on in the world right now, it's likely to come out when I can tour.
Absolutely.
Again.
Okay.
So as it is, no one's really sure. It's probably looking like it'll come out the beginning of next year.
Okay.
But I expect there to be, it's likely there'll be a single or two that'll come out before then, just because, it's ready to go.
Right on. Well, I'll be looking for that, man. I can't wait.
Well, thank you, Bob.
So it's my understanding that you taught left-handed 20th century piano at the University of Barcelona. Could you
I
elaborate on
did, yeah.
this? Could you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Sure. So each, I mean, to simplify it, each decade has a unique difference in the 20th century for left-handed piano. It also parallels the music that was happening from what you had with stride piano and early jazz, going through the walking styles swing era, walking bass lines, all the way through to the boogies, and then breaking everything down in different genres, like in jazz, where things become sort of these block chords. And some people that carried on a tradition where they were still playing bits of stride, but then supplementing their left hand with these block chords. So you still had people that were influenced by Ellington, that were influenced by Basie, and they were combining the things that they had grown up playing, listening to older guys like Billy the Lion Smith and James P. Johnson, and then going up through the 40s and boogie woogie and the stuff that came from. I mean, boogie, that style of playing, like Albert Ammons and Meade Lux Lewis, that all translates directly to rock and roll, because that's pretty much exactly what Jerry Lee Lewis was playing. It's exactly what Little Richard was playing, although they simplified it a little bit, and then they played it harder, which I have no problem with.
Right.
And it's up to the 60s. You have these parallels in different styles of music, whether it's sort of contemporary classical music or jazz, and things start to sort of fit together, and the left hand starts to disappear more in the 60s, and by the 70s you start hearing much more simplified left hands, and and through the 70s you see this as well, and you start hearing these sort of simplified, broken left hand chords that would have existed in rock and roll in the 50s, but they're broken apart. So you would have heard it in anything from an Elton John or Billy Joel song to any kind of yacht rock. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was just common. You would hear it even. You would even hear something like that John Paul Jones would be playing with Zeppelin, or you'd hear it the way that Billy Preston would be playing it. Although he was much more of a gospel player, and so he's a little different in that way, just like Dr. John or Leon Russell or something. They're sort of anomalies, because they were playing stuff, that was older. At least the roots of it were.
Right.
But then by the 80s, the left hand starts to disappear. And by the 90s, you just have pads, and it's mostly synth driven. Just like the 80s stuff was synth driven, but you still had this bass that was going. And through the 90s, you started seeing this synth bass stuff that had started with interestingly with Sly Stone back in the 70s, and it was being applied with hip hop and R&B, contemporary R&B, and that's it. I mean, I'm not going into the actual actually how you play these things, which is what I was doing with the master class, because they were all pianists.
Right. So how did you actually get involved in the teaching?
I just got asked.
Someone
asked me.
Okay.
The university asked. I had a couple different people had seen me and had heard me talk in the show about music, and that was just how it happened. And I was playing a show in Barcelona with drawing a blank. Great guitar player. He'd been with I'm embarrassed to say I'm forgetting his name. He was with the Stones for a few years in the early 70s after Brian Jones passed away, before Ron Wood joined. Mick Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was there. I was playing with Mick Taylor, and after the show, or the next day, I did that master class.
Nice. So that was just a one-off deal, or was it?
Yeah, it was a one-off. I did one in San Diego at UCSD. I've been asked to do a couple other ones, but time didn't allow it. I was, so one of these days, I'll have the chance to do all the things that I want to do. And right now I'm trying to fit them all in,
Yeah.
While I have this time, I'm trying to write. I have a project I'm working on. Besides writing the next album, I'm also working on the one after that with Anti-Ballast, which is a project about origin stories, all based, which I've been researching for about 6 or 7 years, and it's all based on the music, and the lyrics are all based on origin stories. So
right on.
Beginning with all kinds of the earliest, the creation myths, folklore, history, religion, science, cultural anthropology, all of it is relevant. And with Anti-Ballast being a world music group, but also a daptone group that's very soulful, it was just kind of a perfect match, because I wanted to find an existing group that played really well together and that would enjoy collaborating on something like this with me.
Right, that's cool. So
yeah, we got started, and we've been working over the phone.
Nice. So next question I have for you, this might help a lot of people out. I was wondering, what advice would you give young musicians who are just starting to play music?
Oh, I think the most important things, there's a bunch of stuff, but first of all, if you love it, don't quit. If you love it, keep doing it, and listen to as many kinds of music as you can. Really, don't be afraid to just tune in to a different station on the radio, and read the liner notes on the records. See who's playing. See where that line takes you. That history of players. Where does it go? How far back can you take it? Listen to all of that music. Listen to. I feel like if you want to make history, you really need to know it first. And if you want to create something new, then being able to understand the history of where it comes from allows you to do it in a really knowledgeable and creative way.
Right. Yeah, I know it's real easy to get caught up in that, just listening to certain styles of music. As a young kid, I did that for a lot of years, and then I finally started branching out, and man, I was missing out on a lot of good stuff.
We all do, I remember being a kid, listening to top 40 radio on my, transistor radio, and it was, the Mighty 690, and you'd hear the same songs, all day long. But at a certain point, I switched the station. I found jazz, and I found all kinds of different things. And at that time, I was a kid. I was in San Diego, so I heard all this Mexican music, and I heard all of these different things, this classical music. I just dug it. The other thing that's so important for kids that are starting out is to play live. It's really important to practice as much as you can, so that you have the muscle memory. But playing live is such a different experience, and you play differently, and your adrenaline is going, and you want to be able to forget all of the things that you practice in your bedroom, and be able to know that you know it, and then think on the spot. And the more you play live, the better you do that.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time today, AJ, man. Is there anything that you would like to promote? Can you tell people where they can find you online? And
Sure. You can find me on Facebook. I'm at AJ Croce there. You'll see my head there. One of my records probably. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. You can go to my website at ajcrocemusic.com. You can see all the records and the merch. You can go to Apple Music or any of the normal places that you buy music.
Well, that's great, man. It was a pleasure, buddy. I really, really appreciate you doing this.
You bet, Bob.
Well, you have a great night and a great rest of your weekend coming up, and hope we can do this again sometime.
Great, man. Take care.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That concludes today's episode of the Metal Bob Live podcast. Please check our webpage for sponsor links and the latest Metal Bob gear. Thank you for listening. Metal Bob out.